Welcome to Noir Street, a channel where every story carries a mystery or something even darker. Our community may be small, so please subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like and tell us in the comments which part of the world you're watching from. Now let's begin the story. Chapter 1. The Wrong Note. I am Nero Wolfe, and I do not concern myself with music, except when it is wrong on purpose. The woman sang the carol clearly, confidently, and then she bent one note like a lie told calmly. No amateur makes that mistake. There are only two reasons to sing a wrong note, fear or a signal. I intended to discover which. The incident occurred at 9:04 in the evening, a time that already placed it firmly in the category of provocation. My routines are not habits. They are disciplines. At 9 o'clock precisely I sit in my chair, drink my beer, and contemplate nothing at all. Interruption is tolerated only under conditions of urgency, and even then I reserve the right to resent it later at leisure. My office on the ground floor of the brownstone on West 35th Street has often been described as imposing. This is inaccurate. It is not designed to impress, it is designed to function. The desk is where it must be, the chairs where they belong, the books arranged for reference, not ornament. The rug is a concession to comfort, the chairs to human frailty. The room has served me faithfully for many years, and I have returned the favor by refusing to alter it. The woman stood near the visitor's chair, as though uncertain whether she would be invited to occupy it. Her coat was sensible and of good quality, her shoes practical, her gloves clean but worn. She had the look of someone who measures her movements carefully, not from vanity but from caution. Archie Goodwin stood beside her, one hip against the desk, wearing the expression he adopts when his curiosity has been engaged, but not yet satisfied. I told her, Archie said, in the tone of a man filing a preemptive defense, that if she planned to sing, she should at least bring sheet music. She said she didn't need it. I did not, the woman said calmly. I needed only to be heard. Her voice was controlled, neither timid nor theatrical. She sang without flourish, without apology. The carol itself was familiar, a seasonal inevitability that I usually endure rather than recognize. The first verse was flawless. Then, on the third line, she altered a single note, flattened it just enough to make the trained ear recoil. It was not a slip. It was placed with precision. I raised a finger to Archie, who closed his mouth reluctantly. When the woman finished, the silence was complete. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate before resuming its duties, as though offended. That note, I said at last, does not belong. No, she replied. You altered it deliberately. Yes. Why? She hesitated. In that pause, I observed the details that matter. Her breathing remained steady, her shoulders did not slump, but her eyes flicked briefly toward Archie and then returned to me. Fear was present, but it was harnessed. I was told, she said, that if I sang it that way, you would listen. That is a presumption, I said. Yes. I considered her for a moment. Presumption is not always unwarranted. Sit, I said, and speak. She sat. Archie retrieved his notebook and assumed a listening posture that suggested he expected a story worth recording. He was correct. My name is Clara Vane, she said. I am employed as a private secretary. For whom? I asked. For Mr. Julian Rook. Archie's pen stopped. He glanced at me, eyebrows raised. Julian Rook was not a man who employed private secretaries lightly. He was a financier of considerable reach, a philanthropist of calculated generosity, and a man whose name appeared in the newspapers often enough to suggest either ambition or trouble, possibly both. You are still alive, I observed. That suggests that the danger you fear has not yet completed its course. No, she said, but it is very near. Proceed. She spoke with care, selecting her words as though each carried weight. She had been in Rook's employ for 3 years. Her responsibilities included correspondence, scheduling, and the maintenance of records, financial summaries among them. 2 weeks earlier, she had noticed a discrepancy. It was small, the kind that invites dismissal, but it recurred, The same amounts shifted slightly, routed through unfamiliar accounts. She had questioned it. She had been told, politely, to forget it. She had not. A week later, she received an envelope at her apartment. It bore no return address. Inside was a single typed page. On it was printed a short line of musical notation, the same carol she had sung. And one sentence, "Sing it wrong if you want to live." Archie whistled softly. "That's festive." I ignored it, she said. 3 days ago, my apartment was entered while I was at work. Nothing was taken. Yesterday, my supervisor suggested I take an indefinite leave of absence. Today, I came here. Why? I asked. Because whoever sent that note knew who you were, she said. They knew I would come to you. That irritated me. I do not like being anticipated. Who else knows of the discrepancy? I asked. No one. Not now. Then your position is precarious and your knowledge incomplete. That makes you an unsatisfactory client. I can pay, she said quickly. That is irrelevant. Archie cleared his throat. Boss, anybody who goes to the trouble of embedding a death warning in Christmas music has imagination. I'd hate to see it wasted. I ignored him. Has anyone died? She hesitated. That was significant. Yes, she said quietly. A junior accountant in Mr. Rook's firm. The police ruled it an accident. He fell down an elevator shaft. That's one way to ruin a career, Archie muttered. He spoke to me the day before, she continued. He asked if I knew anything about music. The silence that followed was heavy. The pieces did not yet fit, but they were present. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to find out what is happening, she said, before it happens to me. I considered the facts: a wealthy employer with complex finances, a secretary who noticed something she should not have, a dead accountant, a musical warning. Someone was managing information with care, and someone else was afraid of exposure. You will remain available, I told her. You will speak to no one else about this matter. You will answer my questions fully and promptly. If you fail in any of these, I will withdraw. She nodded. Relief altered her expression, but it did not erase the fear. Archie escorted her out. When he returned, he looked pleased. Well, he said. Well, I replied. Someone is conducting a careful operation. The wrong note was not meant for me. It was meant for them, to announce that she had sought protection. So now they know she's here. Yes, that's reassuring. On the contrary, I said. It hastens matters. I prefer haste to uncertainty. I rose, signaling the end of the discussion. Contact Inspector Kramer. Ask him, discreetly, for the full report on the accountant's death. Then investigate Mr. Rook's recent transactions, particularly any involving subsidiary or shell entities. Archie blinked. You want discreet, and you want Kramer. I want facts, I said. And Archie, find out who sent that note. Music leaves fingerprints. Printers, paper, notation styles. Someone took care. Care leaves traces. He grinned, already reaching for his coat. On it, I'll try not to hum, when he was gone. I returned to my chair. The beer had warmed. I drank it anyway. Above me, 3 floors up, my orchids waited, indifferent to human intrigue. Outside, New York continued its endless noise, unaware that someone had struck a wrong note with intention. Whether it was meant as a warning or a marker remained to be seen. But the tune had reached me, and I do not ignore bad music. Chapter 2. The singer in grey, she sang in a candlelit hall filled with donors, smiles, and respectable silence. Her name was Clara Vane, performing as Clara Hensley, and her voice was trained, not trembling. Archie noticed the audience applauded, without hearing what I heard. She never looked at the conductor, only at the back wall. That told me the note was not for the room. The hall belonged to the Renshaw Cultural Foundation, a monument to benevolence erected by men who preferred their generosity applauded. It was an old hall, restored rather than preserved, with chandeliers that had been cleaned until they sparkled, but still bore the faint fatigue of age. Candles lined the walls for effect, Electric lights dimmed to flatter the audience and forgive the performers. The crowd was well-dressed, well-fed, and well-satisfied with itself. I would not ordinarily have been present. I detest concerts. Music is an imposition. It demands attention without offering explanation. Yet circumstances had compelled me. Clara Vane, who had asked, with unnecessary apology, that I refer to her by her professional stage's name, Clara Hensley, had informed me that she was scheduled to sing at this event. The performance, she insisted, could not be avoided without provoking questions. Questions she believed were dangerous. I agreed. Danger, when inevitable, should at least be observed. Archie and I sat in the third row, center aisle. Archie had protested the seating. "If I'm going to be dragged to a concert," he said, "I'd prefer an aisle seat with an escape route. Or better yet, a seat outside." "You are here to observe," I told him. "Escaping is irrelevant." He subsided, though not without commentary. Archie dresses well by instinct, but that evening he had achieved something close to elegance, a fact he seemed determined to undermine by whispering remarks about the patrons in front of us. "Spot the donor," he murmured. "See the chin? That's inherited money, and that hat hasn't been in fashion since Hoover." I ignored him. My attention was on the stage. The choir assembled with professional efficiency, rustling into position, faces composed into expressions of reverence. The conductor raised his hands. Silence descended, thick and expectant. Then Clara Hensley sang. Her voice was a disciplined instrument, shaped by years of instruction and practice. It filled the hall without effort, neither strained nor indulgent. She did not perform, she executed. The carol was not the same one she had sung in my office, but the structure was similar enough to make comparison inevitable. She sang correctly, for 2 verses. On the third, she altered a note. It was subtle, more subtle than before, but unmistakable. The pitch dipped, then recovered like a step taken deliberately off a curb. It was not a mistake. It was a message. The audience did not react. They applauded when appropriate, their approval generous and indiscriminate. Archie leaned toward me. "Well," he whispered, "am I supposed to hear something?" "You are not," I replied quietly, "and that is the point." The conductor did not react either. His eyes remained fixed on his score, his hands moving with mechanical precision. Clara did not look at him. She did not look at the audience. Her gaze was fixed on the back wall of the hall, just above a decorative arch, as though she were addressing someone unseen. That interested me. When the performance ended, applause filled the room. Clara inclined her head modestly and stepped back into the choir. The donors smiled, satisfied that they had consumed culture and discharged their obligation to applaud it. "Come," I said to Archie. "We will not linger." Backstage access had been arranged in advance, facilitated by a discreet contribution to the foundation and a conversation with a man who believed he was doing us a favor. We found Clara in a small anteroom, removing her gloves. She looked pale but composed. "You sang the wrong note again," I said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was told to," she replied. "By whom?" "I don't know." "Do you know for whom?" She hesitated. "I think I do." "Then speak." She told us that the day after visiting my office, she had received another message. This one had been slipped into her music folder backstage during rehearsal. It contained no words, only a single handwritten mark on the score, a small circle around the altered note. "They wanted to know if I was under protection," she said. "If I sang it, they would know." "And now they do," Archie said. "Yes." "Did they say what happens next?" he asked. Number that was consistent with the pattern. Information was being released in measured increments, like notes in a controlled composition. "Who has access to your music?" I asked. "Several people," she said. "The conductor, the accompanist, the stage manager, other singers." Anya knew, she considered. "A man. He joined the technical staff last week. He doesn't belong to the foundation. He said he was contracted." "Description," I said. She provided it. Archie wrote it down. "What about Mr. Rook?" Archie asked. "Was he here tonight?" "Yes," she said. In the front row he always attends. Did he react? Number, he applauded. I nodded. That meant nothing. Applause is the most versatile disguise. We left Clara with instructions to return home and do nothing unusual. Archie escorted her to a waiting car, while I waited in the hall, watching the donors disperse. Mr. Julian Rook emerged surrounded by admirers. He was a tall man, well-preserved, with the easy smile of someone accustomed to being liked. He glanced in my direction once, briefly, then looked away. He knew who I was. That, too, told me something. On the drive back to the brownstone, Archie was uncharacteristically quiet. When he spoke, it was to ask the question he had been restraining. So, he said, who was the note for? Not for us, I replied. Not for the audience, it was a signal to someone who knows how to listen. And who listens to music like that? Someone entrained, I said, or someone instructed. Back in my office, I reviewed the facts while Archie poured beer. The accountant's death, the financial discrepancies, the musical signals. Someone was monitoring Clara's movements. Someone wanted to know when she sought help, and from whom. She's bait, Archie said finally. Yes, I agreed, but not by her own choice. And the fisherman is cautious, I said. Cautious men leave trails. Archie grinned. Then I'll start following footprints. Want me to start with the mystery stagehand? Yes, I said. And Archie? Yeah, listen to the music. He laughed. I'll try, but if I start humming carols in July, shoot me. When he was gone, I sat alone, considering the performance. The wrong note had been placed with care, in a hall full of people who could not hear it. That meant the intended recipient was specific and present, or would learn of it quickly. Music, like language, can be used to conceal as well as reveal. And someone, somewhere, had just been told that Clara Hensley was no longer alone. That knowledge, I suspected, would have consequences. Chapter 3, a message, without words, after the performance. Clara vanished before congratulations could trap her. Archie followed, but she slipped out like smoke through a cracked door. The carol's lyrics spoke of peace. Yet the altered note broke the harmony entirely. I replayed it in my head, slow and deliberate. The wrong note landed exactly on the word night. That fact mattered more than anything else I knew. I was alone in my office when the conclusion settled, which is the proper way for conclusions to behave. Archie was still out, pursuing Clara's vanishing act with the tenacity of a bloodhound, who suspects the rabbit has developed wings. Fritz was upstairs in the kitchen, clanking with the reassurance of routine, and the brownstone itself had reached that calm phase of the evening when even New York seems to pause for breath. I sat in my chair, hands folded, eyes closed, and listened. Not to sound, but to memory. Music, though I disdain it, obeys rules as strict as mathematics. Notes do not exist in isolation. They acquire meaning through relationship. When one is altered, it is not simply wrong. It becomes a statement. Intent intrudes. Structure is violated for a reason. The carol's line resolved. Inevitably on the word night, not merely night as a syllable or a rhyme, but as an idea, darkness, concealment, the hour when respectable people sleep and disreputable things occur efficiently. Clara had flattened the note there both times. Not earlier, not later, exactly there. Coincidence is a refuge for the incurious, and I have never been accused of that. The telephone rang. Wolfe, I said. It's Kramer, came the familiar growl, and you're working overtime on my nerves. You have always been generous with them, I replied. What have you learned? He sighed audibly, the sound of a man surrendering small ground to preserve his footing elsewhere. Off the record, the accountant, Peter Lasky, fell down an elevator shaft in Rook's Midtown building. Security footage was incomplete. Maintenance logs were adjusted after the fact. The medical examiner signed off on accidental trauma, but privately he said it was too neat. Neat, I said, is not a medical term. It means, Kramer said, that gravity didn't work alone. Anything else? Yeah, Lasky's phone went missing. Never recovered, and his laptop was wiped clean before anyone thought to check it. That will be all, I said. I hung up. A missing phone, erased records, a musical warning. All methods of controlling information. Someone had silenced Lasky before he could articulate what he knew. Now someone was testing Clara, testing whether she would comply, whether she would signal obedience, whether she would survive. Archie returned nearly an hour later, coat still on, eyes bright with the restless irritation of a man who has lost his quarry by inches. She didn't go home, he announced. That, I said, was unlikely. I followed her car, he continued. She ditched the driver 2 blocks from the hall, ducked through a service entrance, and vanished. I checked alleys, lobbies, cabs, and a very suspicious hot dog vendor. Nothing. Good, I said. He stared at me. Good. Yes. It suggests initiative. Or panic. Fear panics, I said. Intelligence maneuvers. He removed his coat and poured himself beer, drinking before commenting, which was unusual for him. You think she planned it, he said finally. I think she was instructed, I replied. And that instruction included disappearance. By the same people who want her singing wrong notes. Possibly, or by someone who wants to see who reacts to her silence. Archie grimaced. This is starting to feel like espionage. Nonsense, I said. Spies, trade secrets, this concerns accounting. He looked wounded. There's no romance in debits. There is motive, I said, which is more useful. I told him about the note on night. He listened without interruption, his expression shifting from skepticism to reluctant interest. So the word matters, he said. Why that one? Because it marks time, I replied. Night is when things are concealed, when records are moved, when people fall. That's cheerful. Reality often is not. We reviewed what we had. Julian Rook, whose wealth depended on reputation, Peter Lasky, dead before he could speak, Clara Hensley, singer and secretary, a technical employee with access, and an unknown correspondent fluent in musical symbolism. The pattern suggested orchestration. Someone was conducting unseen. What if the song isn't a warning? Archie said suddenly. Then what is it? A receipt, he said. Proof she did what she was told. I considered that. It was plausible. Yes, I said. A confirmation sing the note, and they know she is compliant, or at least visible. And if she doesn't, then night arrives. Archie shuddered theatrically. Remind me not to take up singing. There is another possibility, I said. Of course there is. The note may identify a location. He frowned. Now, you've lost me. Night, I said, is not only time, it is also absence of light, darkness, concealment. It may refer to a place, a dark room, or a name, I said, something designated by that word. Archie's eyes sharpened. You think it's a code? Music frequently is. He finished his beer. Then I'll start looking for places connected to Rook with night in the name. Clubs, properties, shell companies, anything. Yes, I said, and inquire discreetly into facilities used after hours. He grinned. Discreet is my middle name. It is not, I said, but proceed. When he left, I remained where I was, considering Clara's disappearance. It troubled me less than it should have. She had never been the central figure. She was an instrument, willing or unwilling, in a composition someone else had written. The wrong note had been sung twice, publicly. That meant its purpose was no longer private. Someone had wanted witnesses, people who could not interpret what they heard, but could confirm it occurred. That suggested confidence, or desperation. Both are dangerous. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. Above me, my orchid slept in regulated warmth and light, oblivious to the dissonance below. Somewhere in the city, night had already begun its work. Records would be altered, alibis arranged, movements disguised as accidents. But music once heard cannot be unheard. And the wrong note still echoed. On night, Chapter 4. The man who paid her the event's sponsor, Edwin Crowley, claimed ignorance and wore it well. He financed the concert, the hall, and Clara's contract. Crowley said music was charity, money was obligation. But his eyes tightened when I mentioned the note. Men do that when they know more than they've rehearsed. Edwin Crowley received me at 11 o'clock the following morning, a choice of hour that was deliberate enough to be revealing. It was late enough to suggest he did not feel threatened by urgency, and early enough to convey the appearance of cooperation. Men like Crowley cultivate timing with care. It is one of the few habits money teaches reliably. His offices occupied the top floor of a building on Madison Avenue, whose exterior advertised discretion, while its interior indulged extravagance. The lobby was hushed, carpeted deeply enough to muffle both footsteps and conscience. The elevator rose without ceremony, opening directly into a reception area where a young woman sat behind a desk, whose polish suggested it had never known actual use. Her smile was efficient, neutral, and dismissive in equal measure. "You are expected," she said, as though expectation were a courtesy extended only to the deserving. Archie and I were escorted through a pair of heavy doors into Crowley's office. The room was large without being welcoming, spacious in the way that emphasizes distance rather than comfort. Crowley believed in space the way other men believe in fortifications. The walls were paneled in dark wood, the windows generous and perfectly clean, offering a view of the city that implied ownership rather than admiration. The furniture was expensive and slightly hostile, arranged to keep visitors subtly off balance. Crowley rose from behind his desk with the practiced smoothness of a man who had rehearsed the gesture. He was in his early 50s, fit without vanity, his silvering hair managed rather than allowed. His suit was immaculate, his tie conservative, his shoes polished to a reflective sheen. He shook my hand warmly, but not too warmly. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "this is an honor." "It is not," I replied, "but it is necessary." He blinked, then recovered with a polite smile. Archie watched him with open interest, his expression that of a man attending a performance he expects to improve. "Please," Crowley said, gesturing toward the chairs. "Sit. May I offer you coffee, tea?" Number Archie declined as well, with unnecessary cheer. Crowley seated himself behind the desk, folding his hands carefully, aligning his cuffs. He looked at ease, but not relaxed. There is a difference. "I understand you attended last night's concert," he said. "Yes, and enjoyed it." He laughed softly, as though indulging a known eccentricity. "You are known for your candor, Mr. Wolfe." "I am known," I said, "for accuracy." He inclined his head. "How may I help you?" "You financed the event," I said. "Yes." "You financed the hall." "Yes." "And you underwrote the contract of the principal soloist, Clara Hensley." "Yes," he said again. "I support the arts." "You support them selectively," I said. "All patronage is selective," he replied smoothly. "Indeed. Tell me why you selected her." He paused, just long enough to suggest thought without revealing uncertainty. "Talent," he said. "Presence, discipline. And she required support." "Why did she require support?" "She was transitioning," he said, "from administrative work into performance. That," I said, "is an unusual transition." "Not unheard of," he replied. "Did you know she was also employed by Julian Rook?" "Yes." "Did you know she had access to his financial records?" His eyes tightened. It was subtle, quickly corrected, but it was there. He relaxed again, the way a man does when he believes a momentary lapse has gone unnoticed. "I knew she was capable," he said. "Competence often brings responsibility." "Did you know she received anonymous messages?" "Numbered." "Did you know one of those messages instructed her to sing a wrong note?" This time his eyes tightened more noticeably. His hands shifted on the desk, fingers pressing together. "Music," he said carefully, "is not my specialty." "No," I agreed. "Money is." Archie leaned forward slightly. Funny thing, Mr. Crowley. Music and money both depend on timing. Miss it, and everything sounds wrong. Crowley smiled at Archie. You must be Mr. Goodwin. I've been called worse, Archie said pleasantly. Crowley returned his attention to me. Mr. Wolfe, I assure you. You assure me of nothing, I said. You will answer my questions. The temperature in the room changed, not physically but perceptibly. Crowley inhaled slowly. What do you believe I know? He asked. That, I said, is precisely what I am here to determine. We spoke for several minutes without progress. Crowley admitted nothing outright, denied nothing directly, and offered explanations designed to sound forthcoming while remaining empty. He spoke of philanthropy as obligation, of discretion as necessity, of the unfortunate complexities of large financial structures. He lamented the death of Peter Lasky in the abstract language reserved for people one has never intended to mourn. He expressed concern for Clara Hensley in tones that implied ownership rather than empathy. Then I mentioned the word night. Miss Hensley altered a note on that word, I said, twice. Crowley's hands tightened together, knuckles whitening briefly. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. I'm afraid, he said. I don't follow. That, I said, is regrettable. I stood. Perhaps you will follow more closely if I explain the consequences of continued evasion. His smile vanished. Is that a threat? It is an observation, I replied. Someone is manipulating events through coded signals. One man is dead. One woman has disappeared. You financed the stage on which those signals were delivered. Crowley rose as well, his expression controlled, but no longer pleasant. Are you suggesting I am responsible? I am suggesting, I said, that you are informed. He studied me for a long moment. Then he exhaled, a measured release of breath, and sat again. Off the record, he said quietly. Archie's grin was brief and satisfied. There are accounts, Crowley said, that Mr. Rook prefers not to discuss. They are legal, but unattractive overnight transfers. Temporary holdings, devices used to avoid scrutiny. Why? I asked. To protect investments, he said. To manage exposure. And Peter Lasky was curious, Crowley said, excessively so. And Clara was useful, he said, almost reluctantly. Useful how? She could see, he said. And she could be guided. By you. Not directly. By whom? Crowley hesitated. There is a committee. Committees, I said, are designed to distribute responsibility until no one can find it. He did not argue. When did the music begin? I asked. When Lasky began asking questions, Crowley said. Samani suggested a method of communication that would pass unnoticed. Why music? He smiled thinly. Because no one listens carefully. That, I said, was a miscalculation. He looked at me sharply. Miss Hensley is no longer under your protection, I said. No, he admitted. She stopped answering calls after the performance. That, I said, may be fortunate. Crowley leaned back, suddenly looking older. What do you want from me? Names, I said. Places. Accounts. He hesitated, then nodded. There is a holding company. Nightfall Enterprises. Archie's head snapped up. That, I said, is instructive, Crowley continued, resignation creeping into his voice. It operates after hours. It exists to move money without attracting attention. And the elevator shaft? I asked. Crowley closed his eyes briefly. Lasky knew where the money went. I turned to Archie. You were correct. Archie looked pleased. I hate when that happens. We left Crowley with instructions to remain available and silent. He did not object. Outside, in the elevator, Archie let out a long breath. Nightfall Enterprises, he said. That's almost poetic. Yes, I replied, and poetry, like music, is often used to disguise intent. He glanced at me. Where to now? To nightfall, I said, before night finishes its work. Chapter 5, Fear Has a Sound. Archie found Clara the next day in a boarding house with the curtains closed. She denied everything until my name was said aloud. Then she stopped breathing for a second. She admitted the note was wrong, but said nothing more. Fear was there, thick and heavy, but fear alone does not shape a signal so precise. The boarding house was on West 29th Street, a narrow building wedged between a dry cleaner and a florist that had survived by refusing to modernize. Archie described it to me later as the kind of place where the wallpaper listens and the stairs remember things. He had gone alone. At my instruction, I did not wish my presence announced prematurely. Fear speaks more freely before it knows who is listening. The landlady was a woman of indeterminate age and permanent suspicion. She had eyed Archie as though he were a process server until he smiled at her, at which point she eyed him as though he were worse. "I'm looking for a Miss Hensley," Archie said. "We don't have singers," the woman replied. "She's between engagements," Archie said cheerfully. "Very quiet engagements." That had done it. The woman had pursed her lips, accepted his card with visible reluctance, and pointed upstairs without another word. Archie climbed carefully. The stairs, he told me, creaked in protest rather than complaint. Clara's room was on the 3rd floor, at the back. The curtains were drawn despite the clear morning, and the air inside was stale with the particular odor of places where windows are closed against more than weather. Clara opened the door only a few inches at first. When she recognized Archie, she opened it fully, then locked it again behind him. She looked smaller, not physically. Fear has no effect on dimensions, but diminished, as though some essential certainty had been stripped away. Her coat lay folded on the bed. A single suitcase stood open, half-packed, as if she could not decide what was necessary. "I told you not to come," she said. "You didn't tell me where to go instead," Archie replied. "That's on you." She laughed briefly, a sound that did not belong in the room. "You shouldn't be here." "That makes 2 of us," Archie said. "But your timing's good. Breakfast was terrible." She did not smile. He began gently, the way he does when he is trying to coax information rather than trap it. He asked if she was safe. She said she didn't know. He asked if anyone had contacted her. She said no. He asked if she knew who had sent the notes. She said no again too quickly. He told her my name. The effect was immediate. Her face went pale, and for the briefest moment her breath stopped, as though her body had forgotten the mechanics. "You told him," she said. "Yes," Archie replied. "And now I'm telling you that pretending ignorance isn't going to work much longer." She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly together. When she spoke again, it was carefully. "I didn't plan it," she said. "The singing, I didn't choose the note." "Who did?" Archie asked. She shook her head. "I can't say." "You can," Archie said. "You just won't." She looked up at him sharply. "You don't understand." "That's my job description," Archie said. "Try me." She took a long breath. "They told me it was a test," she said. "A way to prove I could be trusted." "Trusted to do what?" "To listen," she said, "and to repeat." "That sounds like singing," Archie said. "It wasn't about music," she said. "It was about obedience." That, Archie later told me, was when he knew she would eventually talk. People who admit obedience are already halfway to confession. "If I didn't." She stopped. "Night," Archie supplied quietly. She nodded. "Who are they?" he asked. She shook her head again, more violently this time. "I don't know names. I was never given names, only instructions." "How were they delivered?" She hesitated. "Notes. Sometimes in my work bag, sometimes in my music, once on my phone, but only a blank message with a timestamp." "That's not much," Archie said. "It was enough," she replied. "They knew where I was. They knew what I saw." "And what did you see?" he asked. She closed her eyes. Numbers that didn't belong together, accounts that moved at night, transfers that vanished by morning. Archie nodded. Nightfall Enterprises. Her eyes flew open. That was when she began to cry. Not loudly, not theatrically, but with the exhausted relief of someone who has been holding still for too long. "They said Peter fell," she whispered. "They said he was careless." "And you didn't believe them?" Archie said. "No," she said. "He was careful. He taught me how to be." Archie let the silence sit. When she had composed herself, he asked the question that mattered. "Did they tell you to disappear?" "Yes." "Why?" "So they could watch," she said. "To see who came looking." Archie smiled thinly. "Lucky you. You got me." She looked at him. "And him?" "Yes," Archie said. "Especially him." When Archie returned to the brownstone, he reported all this to me with only minimal embellishment. I listened without interruption, then considered. "She is afraid," Archie concluded. "Really afraid?" "Yes," I said. "But fear alone does not produce structure." "What do you mean?" "She followed instructions precisely." I said. "The note, the timing, the disappearance, that requires more than panic. It requires understanding." "You think she knows more than she's saying?" "I think she knows more than she admits knowing," I said. "There is a difference." Archie frowned. "She swore she didn't know who they were." "She may not know names," I said, "but she knows patterns. And patterns point somewhere." "Yes." I stood. "Bring her here." Archie blinked. "Here, boss." "She's barely holding together." "All the more reason," I said. "Fear dissipates in clarity, and this house is clear." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll get her tonight." When he was gone, I sat alone, thinking about fear. Fear has a sound, though it is rarely audible. It tightens speech, shortens breath, flattens choices. But it can also sharpen perception. Under the right conditions, fear listens very closely. Someone had counted on that. Someone had assumed that fear would keep Clara compliant and isolated. They had underestimated something else: the precision of the signal they demanded. Fear makes people sloppy. Precision comes from intention, which meant that somewhere behind Clara's fear was a mind that understood exactly what it was doing and exactly how to be heard without speaking. That mind would surface soon. Fear, like music, cannot be sustained indefinitely. Sooner or later, it resolves. Chapter 6. The silent listener. Someone else attended the concert who did not clap at all. A man named Harold Pierce, accountant, quiet, invisible. He left immediately after the wrong note sounded. Archie traced him to Crowley's shipping firm. Silence, I find, is often a reply. Silence is not absence. It is choice. It is discipline. It is intent made invisible. That observation was still arranging itself neatly in my mind when Archie returned to the brownstone late that afternoon, with the particular restlessness he acquires only when something has resisted him, just long enough to become valuable. He did not remove his coat. He did not sit. He paced the rug in short, impatient arcs, which for Archie is a declaration that the facts have arrived out of sequence and demand correction. "You remember how I said everybody applauded at the concert?" he asked. "Yes," I said, with enthusiasm unrelated to discrimination. "Everybody except one guy," Archie said. I didn't catch it at first because I was watching faces. Turns out I should have been watching hands. I did not interrupt. Archie's pacing slowed, which meant he was approaching coherence. "Harold Pierce," he continued, mid-40s, accountant. No donor badge, no foundation pin, no companion. Saturday on the aisle, 3 rows back, like he planned his exit before the music started. "And he did not clap," I said. "Didn't move," Archie confirmed. "Didn't smile, didn't frown, didn't blink. He might as well have been part of the furniture." "Until the note," I said. "Exactly," Archie replied, stopping at last and facing me. "When Clara hit the wrong note, right on night, he stood up, not during applause, not after the piece. Immediately. That timing mattered. Timing always matters." "That," I said, "is not reaction, it is recognition." Archie nodded. "That's what I thought. So I followed him. You have been busy, I observed. Saman had to be, Archie said. He walked 6 blocks, steady pace, no looking back. Then he caught a cab. I stayed with him all the way. Where? I asked. To a warehouse in Long Island City, Archie said. No sign on the front. No windows worth mentioning, security lights. Cameras that look like they work. Crowley Shipping, I said. Archie's mouth twisted into a grin he did not enjoy. Subsidiary night operations. Minimal staff. Guess who works there? Mr. Pierce, I said. Internal auditor, Archie said. Which is accountant. Speak for no one notices him, unless he wants them to. Unofficially, I said. A listener, Archie replied. A verifier, the guy whose job is to make sure the signal was received. I considered that. It aligned with everything we knew. Music as signal, singer as instrument, listener as confirmation. He did not clap, I said, because applause would have been irrelevant. Or wrong, Archie said. You don't applaud instructions, you acknowledge them. Yes, I agreed. And how did he acknowledge this one? Archie flipped open his notebook. He clocked in. Night shift, same as always. And the night Lasky died? I asked. Same, Archie said. Right next to the freight elevators. Logs show him present from 8:45 to midnight. Silence filled the room. Not empty silence, but the kind that settles when the shape of a thing becomes unmistakable. Pierce did not push Lasky, Archie said finally. No, I agreed. He did not need to. He just had to know when Lasky would be alone, Archie said. When the cameras would be down, when the maintenance logs would be altered. Yes, I said. He listened. Others acted. Archie rubbed his jaw. That's colder than I like. Yes, I said, which suggests premeditation, not impulse. I rose and went to the window, looking out at the city without seeing it. Somewhere among those buildings, Harold Pierce was almost certainly doing exactly what he always did, observing, confirming, remaining unnoticed. Pierce attended the concert, I said, not as a patron, but as a checkpoint. And Clara passed, Archie said. She sang the note, yes. And then she disappeared, Archie said. Which probably wasn't in the original plan. No, I said. Silence unsettles men who rely on signals. I think, I said, that men who depend on confirmation do not tolerate ambiguity well. Clara's disappearance introduced it. And ambiguity makes accountants itch, Archie said. Indeed. He consulted his notes again. Pierce lives alone. No close family. No visible friends. Eats at the same diner 3 nights a week. Pays cash. Reads financial journals and instruction manuals. Invisible, I said. Deliberately, Archie said. No ambition, no sloppiness, no curiosity beyond his lane. Such men, I said, are selected carefully. Archie frowned. He doesn't think of himself as dangerous. No, I said, he thinks of himself as necessary. And necessary people are the hardest to scare, Archie said. Yes, I agreed, but not the hardest to expose. Archie leaned forward. So what now? Now, I said, we speak to Mr. Pierce. Archie's grin widened. Directly? No, I said. Quietly, men like Pierce talk when they believe they are still unseen. Using Crowley? Archie asked. If necessary, I said. Crowley's loyalty is negotiable. And when do we let Pierce know we've noticed him? I allowed myself a thin, precise smile. When silence stops being useful. I'll arrange something casual. Coffee, lunch. Accidental overlap at the diner. Choose a setting where he believes himself anonymous, I said, and ensure he does not feel cornered. That's a tall order, Archie said. I corner people for a living. Then restrain yourself, I said. He laughed and left. When I was alone again, I returned to my chair and considered Harold Pierce. He was not a villain in the dramatic sense. He was a mechanism, a man designed to listen, confirm, and remain invisible. Such men rarely consider themselves responsible. They do not push. They observe. They do not kill. They verify. But verification is participation. The wrong note had never been meant for the audience. It had been meant for Pierce. He had heard it. He had understood it, and he had responded in the only way he knew, by ensuring that the machinery continued to operate smoothly. Silence, I reflected, is often mistaken for ignorance. More often, it is agreement. And agreement, once given, binds more tightly than speech. The next movement would determine whether Harold Pierce could continue to listen, or whether he would finally be required to speak. Chapter 7. The Hidden Ledger. Pierce kept books that did not balance by design. Crowley's company moved cargo that never appeared on manifests. Clara's brother worked the docks and disappeared 3 months earlier. She sang the note on the word night because that was when he vanished. This was not art, it was accusation. The ledger arrived without ceremony, which was appropriate. Truth, when it has been deliberately concealed, seldom announces itself with drama. It arrives quietly like an overdue bill slipped under the door. Archie brought it to me just after noon, his expression carefully neutral, which told me more than enthusiasm would have. He closed the office door behind him and set the folder on my desk without comment. "That," I said, "is not empty." "No," Archie replied, "and it doesn't want to be." I opened it. The ledger was not a ledger in the traditional sense. There was no leather binding, no gilt edging, no pretense of legitimacy. It was a collection of photocopied pages, spreadsheets, printed and reprinted until the ink had softened. Numbers crowded into columns that seemed orderly until one looked closely. The balances were tidy, too tidy. "These don't reconcile," I said. "They're not meant to," Archie replied. Pierce kept 2 sets. This is the one he thought nobody would ever see, from a filing cabinet that thought it was invisible. Pierce's office at Crowley Shipping was a study in deliberate anonymity. Beige walls, standard desk, standard chair, standard cabinets, everything chosen to suggest that nothing worth noticing occurred there. Archie had noticed anyway. A misaligned drawer, a lock worn smoother than the others. Silence. Once again, had replied too carefully. The ledger told its story without embellishment. Cargo moved without manifests. Containers logged as empty that were anything but. Transfers routed through nightfall enterprises, timed precisely between midnight and 4 a.m., when oversight slept and accountability was theoretical. Money moved in corresponding patterns, small amounts, frequently never enough alone to attract attention. Pierce had balanced the visible books by omission. What did not exist could not unbalance. "This is elegant," Archie said, in a criminal sort of way. "Yes," I agreed. "Elegance is often wasted on crime." I turned the page. "And this," I said, "is motive." Names appeared in the margins: dock workers, drivers, temporary hires, men paid in cash, men without benefits, men who could vanish without immediate consequence. One name appeared twice, then not at all. Thomas Hensley. Archie exhaled slowly. "That's Clara's brother." "Yes." "He worked the docks," Archie said. "Longshoreman, night shifts." "Night," I repeated. Archie nodded. "Reported missing 3 months ago. No body, no investigation worth the name, classified as transient." "Convenient," I said. Archie leaned against the desk. "Clara never mentioned him." "No," I said, "because mentioning him would have revealed motive." "And fear," Archie added. "Yes," I said, "fear sharpened by loss." The picture resolved with unpleasant clarity. Thomas Hensley had worked nights at the docks where Crowley's cargo moved without record. He had seen something he should not have seen, or had been seen seeing it. His disappearance had been absorbed by the machinery that consumes the invisible. Clara had known when he vanished. Night, always night. "She didn't sing for help," Archie said slowly. "She sang for him." "Yes," I said. "The wrong note was not a request. It was an accusation." "She was telling someone," Archie said, "that she knew, and telling them when." I said night. Archie stared at the ledger. "That's brave." "No," I said. "It is precise." I closed the folder. Pierce understood the signal. Because it was meant for him, Archie said. Yes, I agreed. He listened. And Crowley financed it, Archie said. And Rook benefited. Yes, Archie grimaced. So where does that leave Clara? In danger, I said. But no longer alone. As if summoned by the thought, the doorbell rang. Archie and I exchanged a glance. He went to answer it when he returned. Clara stood in the doorway, pale but composed. She had shed the borrowed anonymity of the boarding house and wore her fear like armor rather than apology. I remembered, she said without preamble. Sit, I told her. She sat. I didn't plan to tell anyone, she said. Not at first, but when I heard the note in my head again, I realized it was the only thing they couldn't erase. You sang it, I said. Yes, she replied, because they listen. Who? Archie asked gently. The ones who move things at night, she said. The ones who count and don't ask. Harold Pierce, I said. She nodded once. He came to the dock sometimes, never spoke, always watched. And your brother? I asked. Her jaw tightened. Thomas worked nights. He said something was wrong. He said the books didn't match the cargo. Then one night he didn't come home. Did anyone speak to you? Archie asked. Yes, she said. They told me it was an accident. They told me accidents happen at night. And then, I said, they told you to sing. Yes, she said. They thought it was control. They didn't realize it was memory. I regarded her carefully. You chose the note. Yes. Why that word? Because that was when he vanished, she said simply. And because they would know. Archie nodded slowly. That's not art. No, Clara said. It's truth. Silence followed. This time it was not evasive. It was complete. Pierce will deny this, Archie said. Yes, I said, until he cannot. And Crowley? Clara asked. Crowley, I said, will cooperate. And Mr. Rook? That, I said, will require a gathering. Archie grinned. I love gatherings. You love noise. I corrected. This will require reason. Clara looked between us. Will it end? Yes, I said. Because the ledger does not lie, and the music has already been heard. She nodded, relief and grief mingling in her expression. This was never about charity, Archie said quietly. No, I said, it was about night. And night, having been named, was losing its power to conceal. Chapter 8, the threat behind the Carol. Clara confessed the full truth. Under pressure she could no longer resist. Crowley promised her brother's release if she stayed quiet. When silence failed her, she chose music. The wrong note was timed for Pierce to hear. A signal meant to say, I remember confession, when it finally arrives, is rarely dramatic. It does not shout, does not beg, does not collapse in theatrical despair. It comes quietly, like a door closing at last after being held open too long. Clara Hensley's confession came that way, measured, deliberate, and irreversible. By the time she sat in the red leather chair across from my desk, she was no longer weighing the risk of speaking. She had already accepted it. What remained was the necessity of order. The brownstone was prepared for the moment. Fritz had been instructed to admit no one, answer nothing, and treat the telephone as a potential contaminant. Archie stood near the bookcase, arms folded, posture relaxed in appearance only. He was watching Clara, the way a good boxer watches an opponent who has already decided to stop dodging. The room itself applied pressure without effort. It does not tolerate disorder. It encourages sequence. You already know most of it, Clara said. Yes, I replied, but not in full and not in proper arrangement. Begin again. She nodded once. The gesture was small, but it carried weight. When my brother disappeared, she said, I knew it wasn't an accident. That is an assumption, Archie said mildly. No, she replied. It was recognition. She spoke of Thomas Hensley, her older brother by 3 years. A man without ambition, but with habits of observation that could not be suppressed. He worked nights on the docks for Crowley's shipping subsidiary. He noticed what arrived and what did not. Containers unloaded without paperwork, cargo logged that never appeared, trucks that moved at hours when supervision was theoretical. He said the numbers didn't breathe. She said, they were too neat, too intentional. I inclined my head, a common symptom. Thomas vanished after a night shift, no witnesses, no record of departure. The police accepted the report, asked perfunctory questions, and quietly categorized him as transient. The docks absorb men easily, the city provides cover too. Weeks later, Clara found a folded piece of paper in her desk drawer at Rook's office. She removed it from her bag and placed it on my desk. It was blank. They never write what matters, she said. Writing survives. What mattered then? Archie asked. Timing, she replied. That afternoon, Edwin Crowley called me. Crowley requested a private meeting, not at his office, not at hers, but at a quiet restaurant near the river, a place designed to swallow conversation whole. He was gentle, she said, sympathetic. He spoke as a benefactor, not an adversary. He expressed regret for her distress and assured her that Thomas was alive. He said there had been a misunderstanding, she said, that my brother had been moved for his own protection. You're located, Archie murmured. Crowley promised Thomas would return when certain matters were resolved. Cooperation, he implied, would hasten that resolution. Silence would preserve lives. He never threatened her outright. He did not need to. He said, accidents happen at night, Clara said. He said night is when mistakes are made. And you understood the implication, I said. Yes, she replied. Completely. Her instructions were incremental. Stay late. Make copies, leave folders where they would be found. She was never told why, never told for whom, only that compliance mattered. She complied because she believed Thomas was alive. Then Peter Lasky began asking questions. Her voice tightened when she spoke his name. Lasky, she said, was meticulous to the point of anxiety. He asked about accounts that did not reconcile. He asked about after Hawes transfers. He asked whether she had noticed Nightfall Enterprises. The night he died, she said, Crowley called again. She paused, then continued, her voice steady but stripped of softness. He said Peter had been careless. He said this was why discretion mattered. Then he said, silence is easy, but silence needs reminders. The next morning, the first musical message appeared, not a threat, not in words, a line of notation and implication. Music would be her method of reassurance, a public signal that could pass unnoticed by those who did not know how to listen. They thought it was elegant, she said. They thought no one would ever hear it. And you agreed, Archie said. Yes, she replied, because I still believed my brother was alive. The concerts were chosen with care, public respectable, audiences trained to applaud without listening. The wrong note would dissolve into harmony, audible only to those trained to hear it. And Harold Pierce? I asked. He was always there, she said. Not every time, but often enough. He never looked at me. He listened. That, I said, was his function. Yes, she agreed. They told me he would know. After the first performance, nothing happened. No reprimand, no approval, silence. Silence meant compliance. After the second performance, she was instructed to disappear temporarily. They wanted to see who would notice, she said, who would react when the signal stopped. And that was when you chose the word, Archie said. Yes, she replied. That was when I stopped obeying. Weeks had passed without proof of Thomas's life. No message, no sign, only instructions. Clara understood then that Crowley's promise was leverage, not intention. So you chose night, I said. Yes, she said, because that's when Thomas vanished. That's when Peter died. That's when they believe they are safe. She met my eyes without flinching. I knew Pierce would hear it. I knew Crowley would understand it. I wanted them to know, I remembered. You turned compliance into accusation, I said. Yes, she replied, Music could say what silence couldn't. The room was silent when she finished. Not evasive silence, not fear, but the kind that settles when all pieces are finally in place. The threat behind the carol was now fully exposed. Music had not been art. It had been leverage. A wrong note precisely placed had become a declaration sharper than any spoken threat. "You understand," I said at last, "that by speaking now, you have removed the possibility of retreat." "Yes," Clara said. "I accepted that when I sang, and you accept the risk." "Yes." "Good," I said. "Then we proceed." Archie straightened, satisfaction unmistakable. "Proceed how?" "With a gathering," I said. "Crowley, Pierce, Rook, all present, all listening." Archie grinned. "Nothing like an audience that doesn't applaud." "This is not theatre," I said. "It is accounting." Clara allowed herself a faint smile, the first unguarded one I had seen. "The threat behind the carol," I concluded, "relied on the assumption that no one would listen carefully. That assumption has failed." I leaned back in my chair. "A signal meant to say I remember," I said, "is also a signal that says I am no longer afraid. And fear, once stripped of its authority, leaves those who depended on it exposed, unable to hide in silence and unable to conceal themselves in the dark. The final movement was no longer a possibility. It was inevitable." Chapter 9. Murder changes the key. Pierce was found dead 2 nights after Clara's confession. Staged as a robbery, Crowley claimed grief. Clara claimed nothing, but murder introduces urgency, and urgency distorts plans. Pierce had been the only one who could testify cleanly. Crowley had cut his own safety line. Murder, unlike music, does not tolerate ambiguity. It does not invite interpretation or permit rehearsal. It arrives fully formed, brutally certain, and in doing so it alters the structure of everything around it. Harold Pierce's death did not merely add a corpse to an already elaborate pattern. It destroyed the pattern itself. The key changed. The tempo broke. What had been carefully orchestrated became discord. Until Pierce died, the affair had depended on restraint. It had moved in halftones and intervals, signals instead of statements, silence instead of threats, implication instead of force. The wrong note had been effective precisely because it preserved deniability. Murder annihilates. Deniability, it demands explanation, and it does so loudly. Inspector Kramer called me at 8:07 in the morning, a time chosen not for courtesy but for irritation. Kramer uses irritation the way other men use punctuation. It gives shape to his sentences and reveals his mood before his words do. "You were right," he said without preamble, "and now you're involved, whether you like it or not." "That," I replied, "was inevitable from the moment the first note was sung." "Harold Pierce," Kramer continued, "found dead in his apartment late last night, 2 stab wounds to the chest, place torn up to look like a robbery." "Poorly staged," I said. There was a brief silence. "You haven't even seen it." "I do not need to," I replied. "Tell me what was taken." "Nothing that makes sense," Kramer said. "Wallet still there. Watch still on his wrist. Cash untouched. Drawers dumped. Couch cushions slashed, lamp broken. It looks like someone read a handbook called How to Fake a Robbery and skipped the last chapter." "Yes," I said. "The killer wished you to believe something, not to obtain something." "You sound calm," Kramer growled. "I am," I said. "The situation has clarified." "Simplified," he said skeptically. "From where I'm standing, someone just escalated from fraud to murder." "Exactly," I replied. "And that escalation was unnecessary." Kramer exhaled loudly. "You're going to explain that, or am I supposed to guess?" "Pierce was a liability," I said, "but he was also an asset. He was the only participant whose role could be described without embellishment. He listened, he verified, he kept records, he had no visible motive." "And now he's dead," Kramer said. "Yes," I replied, "which means someone panicked." "Crowley's lawyers are already warming up," Kramer said. "Of course they are," I said. "They will confuse activity with defense." You want access to the scene? He asked. No, I said. I already know what it will say. That annoyed him. I could hear it in the way his breathing changed. You always say that, he muttered. Fine, but don't disappear on me, Wolfe. This one's going to need explaining. You will have it, I said, at the proper moment. I hung up and rang for Archie. He arrived within minutes, having learned the essentials through channels that operate faster than official ones. His expression was sober, which for Archie is both deliberate and rare. They killed Pierce, he said. Yes, I agreed, and without finesse. Archie dropped into a chair. That wasn't the plan. No, I said. The plan required Pierce alive. So why do it? He asked. Fear, I replied, or miscalculation, often indistinguishable. Crowley? Archie asked. Almost certainly, I said, or someone acting with his approval. Archie frowned. Pierce was the listener, the verifier. Killing him cuts off, the only clean witness. I finished. Precisely. Archie leaned forward. So Crowley protected himself. No, I said. He exposed himself. Archie blinked. How? Pierce was useful, I said. He was not dangerous until recently. Killing him does not erase the ledgers, the cargo movements, or the shell accounts. It removes only the one man who could explain them without sounding self-serving. And now, Archie said slowly, everyone left has motive. Yes, I said, including Crowley. Archie grimaced. That's sloppy. Murder often is, I replied. Especially when committed to correct an error rather than advance a design. We considered what Kramer would find in Pierce's apartment. It would be as anonymous as his office. Neutral furniture, generic artwork, no indulgences. Pierce had lived like a man who expected never to be noticed. The violence would not match the space. It would be excessive for robbery and insufficient for rage. It would look, in short, exactly like what it was, a silencing. They wanted the questions to stop, Archie said. Yes, I agreed. But murder does not discourage inquiry, it compels it. At noon, Clara arrived without being summoned. That alone was instructive. She had heard the news on the radio. Her face was pale, but her posture was controlled, her expression fixed with resolve rather than fear. Did you know? She asked. Yes, I said. She nodded once. Then it's begun. No, I corrected. It has ended. This was the final mistake. She sat, folding her hands carefully. Crowley did this. Yes, I said, and in doing so, he destroyed his final protection. Archie studied her. You're not surprised? No, she said. Pierce was the only one who listened without lying. They couldn't control him anymore. That, I said, is precisely the point. Until Pierce's death, the operation had relied on deniability. Music had carried threats. Silence had enforced obedience. Pierce's role had been to confirm compliance, not to enforce it. His murder shattered that restraint and replaced it with urgency. Murder changes everything, Archie said. Yes, I replied. It accelerates events, and acceleration erodes judgment. Crowley had relied on distance. Committees, intermediaries, shell corporations, euphemisms. Pierce had been his buffer, absorbing attention without attracting it. With Pierce dead, Crowley stood exposed, forced closer to the center of his own construction. He cut his own safety line, Archie said. Yes, I agreed, and he did so publicly. Murder cannot remain private. It attracts scrutiny, comparison, motive. It forces speech from those who depend on silence. It converts implication into accusation. I stood. It is time. Archie's expression brightened. The gathering. Yes, I said, immediately. Rook too, Archie asked. Especially Rook, I replied. He will attempt to distance himself, and in doing so reveal how deeply he is entangled. And Crowley, he will attend, I said. Men who panic prefer proximity. They mistake it for control. And Clara, She will be present, I said. She is the constant they failed to remove. Archie stood. I'll make the calls. When I was alone again, I considered Harold Pierce. He had not been a mastermind. He had been a mechanism, a man who listened, verified, and believed that silence equaled safety. He had mistaken invisibility for immunity. It never does. Murder alters the architecture of every scheme it touches. It strips away elegance and replaces it with necessity. Crowley had believed himself careful. In killing Pierce, he had revealed himself desperate. And desperation, once exposed, is the easiest condition in the world to dismantle, patiently, methodically, and in full view. The key had changed. The music was finished. What remained was reason. And reason, unlike silence, insists on being heard. Chapter 10. Wolfe reconstructs the song I Rebuilt the Case. The way I rebuild orchids, slow, exact, without mercy. The ledger, the shipping routes, the threats, the timing of the carol. Crowley silenced Pierce to stop the signal from spreading, but the note had already reached me, and I do not miss what is meant to be heard. I do not rush conclusions. Conclusions are not quarry to be hunted down with enthusiasm and luck. They are structures to be assembled stone by stone. Haste introduces weakness, and weakness is intolerable. Orchids taught me that long ago. When an orchid declines, one does not console it. One removes rot, trims decay, adjusts light and temperature, and waits. Either the plant responds, or it proves itself unworthy of further effort. A case is no different. Sentiment is noise. Precision is truth. By the time I summoned the final gathering to my office on West 35th Street, the affair no longer resembled a mystery. It had become an equation. The numbers balanced in only one direction, and no amount of protest could persuade them otherwise. The room was prepared with care. The red leather chairs were arranged in deliberate symmetry, each placed to encourage neither comfort nor hostility, but attention. My desk was cleared of everything not essential. There were no papers to distract the eye, no ornaments to soften the mind. The beer waited, untouched, because routine is a discipline, not a reflex. Fritz had been instructed to remain upstairs, tending to matters culinary, and pretending poorly that nothing of consequence was happening below. Archie stood near the door, notebook in hand, his posture relaxed in appearance. Only Archie enjoys this phase of a case, not because it is dramatic, but because it is inevitable. He likes inevitability. It reassures him that the world, though foolish, is not chaotic. The participants arrived separately, as they always do when they believe separation preserves dignity. Julian Rook arrived first, precisely on time. He was a man who treated punctuality as evidence of importance. His suit was impeccable, his expression faintly irritated, as though he resented being summoned to explain himself. Men like Rook believe their prominence exempts them from consequence. Edwin Crowley followed. He wore grief like a tailored garment, expensive, subdued, appropriate for any audience. His composure was practiced, but his eyes betrayed calculation. Panic had not abandoned him. It had merely learned restraint. Clara Hensley arrived last, escorted by Archie. She was quiet, composed, and no longer afraid in the way fear announces itself. What remained in her was firmer, denser. She took her seat without hesitation, hands folded, gaze steady. Inspector Kramer positioned himself near the back, arms folded, skepticism sharpened by recent events and patience worn thin by them. He had agreed to this gathering because he understood, as all competent policemen eventually do, that reason sometimes accomplishes what authority cannot. Harold Pierce was absent. His absence filled the room. "Sit," I said. They sat. I did not begin at once. Silence, properly used, is an instrument. It exposes impatience, reveals nerves, and forces men to inhabit their own thoughts. Crowley adjusted his cuff. Rook glanced at his watch. Clara remained still. I observed all of it. "Mr. Crowley," I said at last, "you financed culture because culture is quiet. It applauds politely and asks nothing." Crowley inclined his head. "I support the arts." "That is an accusation," Rook said sharply. "No," I said. It is a description. I began where all reconstructions must begin, structure. The shipping routes, I said. Crowley shipping moved cargo that never appeared on manifests. These movements occurred consistently between midnight and 4 a.m., routed through nightfall enterprises. The ledger, maintained by Harold Pierce, balanced only because entire transactions were omitted. What did not exist could not incriminate. Crowley's jaw tightened. Pierce's role, I continued, was verification. He was not a planner. He was not an enforcer. He was a listener. He attended concerts not as a patron, but as a receiver, the wrong note. Always placed on the word night was the signal. That's speculation, Rook said. No, I replied. It is corroboration. I enumerated the facts with care. Pierce's ticket purchased in cash, his seat on the aisle, his departure immediately upon hearing the altered note, his employment at Crowley's shipping subsidiary, his presence on the very nights unrecorded cargo moved, his possession of the only complete private ledger. You were informed, I said to Crowley, each time the note was sung. It told you that Clara Hensley remained compliant, or at least observable. Clara lifted her eyes. You did not sing for help, I said to her. You sang accusation. She nodded once. Your brother vanished on a night shift, I continued. Peter Lasky died at night. You placed the note there because it could not be dismissed as coincidence. You wanted the listener to know that you remembered. Crowley's composure cracked. She was instructed. Yes, I said. By you. Kremer leaned forward. Archie's pen moved steadily. You promised her brother's release in exchange for silence, I said. When silence became unreliable, when it began to threaten exposure, you substituted music. When music ceased to reassure and began to accuse, you panicked. I did nothing, Crowley said, hoarsely. You did, I replied. You killed Harold Pierce. The reaction followed predictably. Rook protested, loudly and indignantly. Crowley denied, too quickly and too often. Clara remained still. Kramer watched. Pierce was your safety line, I said. The only participant whose testimony would have sounded clean. He had no visible motive. Killing him did not erase the ledger. It removed the explanation. You can't prove that, Crowley said. Yes, I said, I can. I reconstructed it then, without flourish and without mercy, the ledger hidden behind false balances. The shipping schedules aligned tonight. Pierce's behavior at the concert. Clara's disappearance. Pierce's growing anxiety. The staged robbery, inept hurried, revealing fear rather than planning. The timing of the murder, executed precisely when Pierce's silence had become dangerous. Fear, I concluded, distorted your judgment. You silenced the listener to stop the signal. I leaned forward, but the signal had already reached me. Silence followed, real silence, not evasion. It was the silence that comes when rebuttal has been exhausted. Rook stood slowly. I want my attorney. Of course you do, Archie said cheerfully. Kramer moved then. Crowley collapsed inward, his carefully maintained posture dissolving. Rook reacted outward, indignation replacing dignity. Clara remained seated, breathing evenly, as though a burden carried too long had finally been set down. When they were gone, escorted, argued with, silenced as necessary, Archie poured beer. You really hate bad music, he said. I hate imprecision, I replied. He grinned. Case closed. Yes, I said, in the only key it could be. Above us, my orchids waited, orderly and exact, indifferent to human dissonance. I would tend to them shortly. Structure must always be restored. Music fades, reason endures. Chapter 11. The final performance. Crowley was confronted, not with accusations, but with inevitability. He broke when the ledger appeared and stayed broken when Clara spoke. The wrong note echoed again, this time in court testimony. Fear had started the song. Truth finished it. There is a persistent misconception, nourished by melodrama and encouraged by the press, that a trial is the climax of a case. It is not. A trial is an after effect. The climax occurs earlier, always in private, when resistance collapses under the weight of coherence. Once that happens, a courtroom becomes merely a place where inevitability is recited, slowly enough for stenographers. By the time Edwin Crowley was sworn in, the case was already finished. I did not attend the proceedings. I have never believed that justice improves with my presence, and courtrooms offend both my ears and my patience. Archie went in my stead, partly because he enjoys watching men unravel in public, and partly because someone had to observe the choreography for errors. He returned each evening with meticulous notes, and the particular satisfaction of a man who has witnessed inevitability perform exactly as rehearsed. On the first evening, he entered my office without knocking, removed his jacket, and sat heavily. "You would have loathed it," he said. "Then it proceeded correctly," I replied. "Oh, absolutely," Archie said. Crowley held together for about 12 minutes. Archie grinned. He came armored. 2 attorneys, 3 binders, a face full of grief. He looked like a brochure for civic responsibility. "And when did the armor fail?" "When the ledger walked in," Archie said. That was as expected. The ledger had never been dramatic. It had never accused. It had merely existed, columns of numbers arranged with such exact dishonesty that denial became absurd. Pierce's handwriting was unmistakable. His habits, notations in the margins, corrections made without erasure, cross-references to accounts that officially did not exist, were all there. You cannot fake method. They tried the usual song, Archie continued. Fabrication, rogue employee, accounting complexity. The phrase, "unfortunate coincidence," made an appearance. "I am unsurprised," I said. "But then they laid the shipping schedules beside the ledger," Archie went on. "Night moves only. Night transfers, night discrepancies, every one of them matched." "Structure," I said. "Exactly," Archie agreed. Crowley didn't react right away. That was the scary part. He just sat there nodding, like he was following along. "Men often do that," I said, "right before the ground disappears." Archie flipped a page. Then Clara testified. That was the moment I regretted not attending, though only briefly. "She didn't perform," Archie said. "No drama, no tears. She just told it in sequence. The meeting by the river, Crowley's voice, the word relocated, the promise that was never meant to be kept." "And the music?" I asked. Archie's eyes lit. "Oh, that landed. When she explained the wrong note, why she chose night, you could feel the room lean in. Even the judge stopped writing." "He understood," I said. "Everyone did," Archie replied. That was when the carol stopped being decoration and started being evidence. Crowley had been watching her, Archie said, not with anger, but with calculation, as though trying to locate the moment where things had gone irretrievably wrong. That moment, of course, had passed long ago. When Clara finished, Archie went on. "Crowley took the stand. That was his biggest mistake. Men who rely on control," I said, "always believe speech will restore it." "Exactly," Archie said. "He talked and talked, charity, complexity, good intentions. He even tried to sound wounded." "And Pierce?" I asked. "That came next," Archie said. "He called Pierce a valued employee, said he was devastated by the murder, said he had nothing to do with it." "And the timing," I said. "They walked him straight into it," Archie replied. "Pierce dies 2 nights after Clara disappears, 2 nights after the second concert, 2 nights after the wrong note stops." I nodded. "That's when Crowley cracked," Archie said. "Not loud, not fast, just unraveling. He lost sequence, couldn't keep dates straight, contradicted himself twice in 5 minutes. "Urgency," I said. "It degrades precision like acid," Archie said. Then they brought back his favorite line, "Silence is easy." "Poor choice," I observed. "The jury hated it," Archie said. "You could see it land wrong. Silence didn't look virtuous anymore. It looked guilty." That evening ended without a verdict, but the outcome was already sealed. Crowley knew it. His attorneys knew it. Rook, watching from the gallery, knew it too. Rook didn't testify, Archie added. He won't. He's already building distance. He will survive, I said, with reduced circumference. Archie laughed. That's one way to put it. On the second day, Crowley's defense collapsed completely. They tried to redirect blame to Pierce, to Lasky, to nameless subordinates, but the ledger refused to cooperate. The numbers remained exactly where they were. Numbers, unlike people, do not panic. And then something interesting happened, Archie said, closing his notebook. Proceed, I said. One of the jurors asked Clara a question, he said. They wanted to know if she thought the wrong note was a message or a mistake. And she replied. I asked. She said, it was neither. It was memory. I allowed myself a moment of silence. That, I said, is accurate. Crowley was convicted without theatrics, no shouting, no collapse, just a man who finally understood that inevitability does not argue. When sentence was passed, he did not look at the judge. He looked at Clara. She did not look back. Later that night, after Archie had gone upstairs, and Fritz had cleared the table, I sat alone in my office. The house was quiet in the way. It becomes only when everything that needed to be said has already been spoken. The city hummed beyond the windows, indifferent and eternal. I thought briefly of Harold Pierce, not with sympathy, but with clarity. He had believed that listening without acting absolved him. He had believed that silence was neutrality. He had been wrong. Silence, in the presence of knowledge, is participation. Music, too, is often misunderstood. People think it exists to soothe, to decorate, to distract. They forget that it can also accuse. A single wrong note, placed with intention, can carry more truth than 1,000 words spoken carefully. Clara had understood that. Crowley had underestimated it, and I had heard it. Above me, in the warm, precisely regulated air of the plant rooms, my orchids rested in ordered rows, each demanding exact conditions and responding with equal exactness. They did not tolerate carelessness. Neither do I. The case was finished, not because a verdict had been rendered, but because coherence had prevailed. Fear had begun the song, truth had finished it. And silence, at last, had nothing left to conceal. Chapter 12, Silence restored Clara, sang again months later, every note correct this time. Her brother's body was recovered, and Crowley's empire collapsed quietly. Music returned to being what it should be. I returned to my chair, my orchids, and my peace. And I remembered, lies may hide in words, but truth can sing. Time is an undervalued ally. It neither persuades nor threatens, it advances. In advancing, it removes distortion. Fear compresses perspective. Urgency bends judgment, and power feeds on immediacy. Time starves them all. In the months following Edwin Crowley's conviction, time did its work with admirable economy, restoring proportion where noise had briefly reigned. The immediate aftermath was predictably clamorous. Newspapers announced conclusions they had not earned. Editorials adopted tones of moral certainty that would have been useful earlier. Commentators speculated with confidence unburdened by comprehension. For a few weeks, Crowley's name appeared with regularity, bracketed by words like fall and betrayal, as though either were novel. Then attention drifted. Another scandal replaced it. That was as it should be. Justice does not require sustained applause. Crowley's commercial holdings did not collapse theatrically. They failed by arithmetic. Auditors examined accounts that had long relied on courtesy rather than accuracy. Transfers once masked by complexity were traced by people who were neither impressed nor intimidated. Subsidiaries discovered that silence does not balance ledgers. Credit lines tightened, then vanished. Partnerships cooled. Confidence evaporated. Power, deprived of attention and insulated privilege, diminished until it was indistinguishable from liability. I have observed that power rarely ends by force. It ends by isolation. Crowley himself aged quickly. Men whose lives depend on control often mistake that control for vitality. When it is removed, nothing remains to sustain them. His sentence was severe but appropriate. He accepted it without spectacle, which was perhaps the most honest act of his career. By then, argument had become irrelevant. He had been defeated not by enemies, but by coherence. Julian Rook survived. As expected, men of his type always do. He testified when required, carefully and selectively, offering facts only when refusal would have been imprudent. He retained his social standing at the cost of his authority. Invitations continued to arrive, but fewer of them carried consequence. Archie later reported that Rook still attended concerts, though he applauded with excessive deliberation, as though enthusiasm itself might be misconstrued. That amused me. Thomas Hensley's body was recovered in early spring, when the river relinquished it without ceremony. Rivers are honest in that way. The coroner's report was concise and definitive. No mystery remained. Death, once documented, is efficient. Clara attended the identification alone. She declined accompaniment and rejected ceremony. Grief, anticipated, rarely indulges display. She returned to New York that evening and resumed her life without announcement. She came to see me once afterward. It was a quiet afternoon. The brownstone was in excellent order. The orchids were thriving, their leaves firm, their roots obedient. Fritz announced her with unnecessary formality. Archie, present under the pretense of organizing files, looked up with interest. She paused in the doorway, surveying the room as though reacquainting herself with a place that had once held danger and now held none. Fear no longer occupied the space for her. That, I noted, was progress of a high order. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "You need not," I replied. "Accuracy is its own justifications." She smiled faintly, the expression of someone who no longer practiced courage because it was no longer required. "I'm singing again," she said. "Yes," I said. "I am aware." Archie grinned. "The boss follows the cultural calendar, strictly professional." She nodded. "Last week. A small hall. No sponsors worth mentioning, just people who wanted to listen." "And every note was correct," I said. "Yes," she replied. It felt quiet. "Good," I said. "Music should not be burdened with messages." She hesitated. "I was afraid it wouldn't be the same." "And was it?" Archie asked. She considered. "No," she said. "It was better. That pleased me." She left shortly thereafter, lighter than when she had arrived. Archie watched her go, thoughtful. "You know," he said. "For a while there, I thought music was going to give me ulcers." "Only dishonest music," I replied. Life resumed its proper scale. Routine returned, which is not monotony but structure. The orchids responded to exact care with exact results. They do not tolerate approximation. They do not lie. They either flourish or fail according to immutable principles. I respect that. The brownstone settled into its accustomed rhythms. Archie resumed complaining about paperwork. Fritz resumed complaining about Archie. Inspector Kramer called less frequently, which is the highest compliment he knows how to pay. Saul Panzer stopped by once to report that certain peripheral figures had relocated to jurisdictions with warmer climates and shorter memories. That was sensible. Spring progressed into summer. The city altered its tempo. Windows opened. Traffic patterns shifted. Voices rose and fell with the weather. None of it required my intervention. That, too, was proper. One evening, seated in my chair with a book I had already read and did not particularly enjoy, a habit I indulge when my mind requires occupation without stimulation, I considered the case in retrospect, not with satisfaction but with clarity. It had begun, as many things do, with a deviation so small that most people would have dismissed it. A single wrong note. Most people hear such things and assume error. They prefer incompetence to intention. They prefer harmony to truth. That preference is exploitable. Lies are inefficient instruments. They require maintenance. They demand reinforcement. They multiply. They rot under scrutiny. Truth, by contrast, is durable. It does not require protection. It can wait. It can hide in plain sight. And occasionally, when circumstances demand it, it can sing music. When honest, is structure in motion. Notes relate according to rules that cannot be negotiated. Alter one deliberately, and meaning emerges. Crowley failed to understand that. He believed silence was safety. He believed complexity would protect him. He was wrong. Silence, like music, is neutral only until intention enters it. Silence used to conceal becomes evidence. Silence used to intimidate becomes confession. Silence restored, true silence, unburdened by fear or deceit, is something else entirely. It is peace. Archie interrupted my reflections by setting a glass of beer on my desk. "You know," he said, "most guys your size celebrate the end of a case by going out. I celebrate by remaining seated." I replied. He laughed. "Figures, still, nice ending." "Yes," I said, "endings should be." I closed my book and surveyed the room. Everything was as it should be. The desk was orderly, the chairs aligned, the light correct, the silence complete. Not evasive, not complicit, but honest. Above me, in the warm, precisely regulated air of the plant rooms, my orchids rested in ordered rows. Each demanded exact conditions and responded exactly as expected. They did not tolerate carelessness. Neither do I. The case was finished, not because a verdict had been rendered, but because coherence had prevailed. No unanswered questions remained that mattered. No signals lingered unresolved. Fear had begun the song, truth had finished it, and silence restored to its proper function meant at last what it always should have meant, nothing hidden.